Now, let's talk about something that I find an affront to what it means to be an Australian or to be a Briton, and that is the right to go into the front bar of the pub and thrash out the issues of the day. I mean, if you can't do it in the front bar of the pub, where can you do it? This is the place where for centuries men, and of course since the 60s and 70s onwards, women have been allowed to go and talk about whatever they want, get something off their chest, talk about politics, vent about their partners, whatever it might be. But it all might come to an end very soon because the Starmer government, Sir Keir Starmer, of course, two-tier Keir, free gear Keir, all the other names they've come up with, they are now trying to push through new workplace discrimination laws. Now, this will basically mean that if you are an employee within a workplace, it is the job of that employer to make sure that you are not offended or discriminated against in any form, otherwise that company can be sued. Now, the definition of this that they're talking about, what they're talking about harassment being, is unwanted conduct that has the purpose or effect of violating the recipient's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it comes from another employee. It can also include customers or clients. And so pubs are now saying, what does that mean if someone at that table over there is having a discussion about transgenderism, for instance, and they say, well, I don't believe that men can be women, and working in that pub happens to be a transgender woman who is a biological man? Will they then say that they were harassed within the workplace and potentially be sued for doing so? The British Beer and Pub Association isn't having a bar of it. They say any legislation must be carefully drafted to make sure it does not have unintended consequences, such as pub workers expected to decide whether private conversations between customers constitute a violation of law. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are in 2025. You cannot even go to the pub and have a conversation about politics without it potentially constituting harassment of staff that will then land that pub in court. We have well and truly jumped the shark here, have we not? And it should be noted, this is not just in Britain. I mean, in terms of exactly what this legislation looks like, but people are being briefed in Australian workplaces in recent years because the Albanese government brought through a whole tranche of new IR laws that included new definitions of harassment and put new restrictions upon businesses in terms of they have to be proactive now. So in Australia, a business has to ask staff whether or not they're being harassed or bullied or discriminated against. It's not good enough to simply say we're available for you to come and talk to me if you feel like you're being bullied. And this is exactly one of the things that people are briefed about, is that if you have a conversation in the workplace that someone else who is not party to that conversation finds offensive, that may constitute harassment. I mean, it is insane.
You're essentially trying to pass a law to ensure that anyone, while they're on the clock, regardless of what their job is, won't overhear something that they find offensive. And of course, what each individual finds offensive is deeply personal. But for me, it's basically nothing. You just can't offend me. Why would I expend that kind of mental and emotional energy on something some flogger said? Other people are triggered by absolutely everything you may or may not say. Does that then extend to you not speaking up when I think you should, and therefore I'm offended by something that you didn't express in a moment that I feel that you should have? This is completely nuts. Like Britain doesn't have enough problems, like the Keir Starmer government doesn't have enough problems to be focusing on, they are now mulling over legislation like this. Is it any wonder that just 4 months after this government came to power, 2.9 POMs signed a government petition on the government's own website saying, we are begging you to call another general election. We are sorry you're in power. You are absolutely trashing our country. And this after that kind of vote of no confidence from the very citizens who elected you to represent them, this is the kind of stuff that they're spending parliamentary time on, hashing out, being like, how can we best legislate this?
I mean, when I was growing up, eavesdropping was considered to be impolite. You were taught you don't listen to other people's conversations. You don't sort of, linger and sort of try to pick up what other people are talking about. Now, there's actually incentive to stand and listen until you are offended and then have people charged. And for politicians to create legislation that is so sloppy and vague, you can't create or have the effect of creating an offensive environment. I mean, what on earth is an offensive environment? And as the Publican Association, as you rightly pointed out, not having a bar of it, very good, I did notice that, then they'll have to be the arbiters on what can and can't be said in their pub.
Exactly.
You can only talk about the weather, and even that is fraught because you might be a climate denier.
But may I say respectfully, because I don't want to offend or harass anyone, that if you go to the pub and then feel offended by things that are said in the pub, you shouldn't be going to the pub. I mean, the pub is one of the last places where you can go and say outrageous things and tell a few blue jokes and have some fun and let off some steam without some blue-haired feminist lunatic transgender person, whatever it might be, coming and yanking you and saying, oh, you can't do that. The pub is the only place where you can still do that stuff. Don't take our simple pleasures away from us, please.
The pub is sacred.